Good afternoon. I'm your host, Don Burgess. Welcome to another News, News and Views here at the House Bermuda. And it's Education Month, and today we are extremely privileged to have some of the VIPs of education in Bermuda. The Minister of Education, Mr. Rain, welcome.
Thank you.
I slightly stumbled on my words, but welcome nevertheless. I'm not nervous or anything, but the Commissioner of Education, Kalmar Richards, and Department of Education Acting Staff Development Officer, Kelly Douglas.
Thank you.
Okay. So yesterday, the education annual report came out for 2019. I joked it was a light read, but there was a lot of information right in there. And one of the key things is the key 5 priorities. Dennis, if you can bring that up. All right, so the key priorities for the education department coming up is increase academic rigor and student engagement. 2, ensure career, college, and workforce readiness. 3, enhance the quality of teacher practice and systemic leadership. 4, improve infrastructure and instructional resources. And 5, ensuring system success. I'd like for you to maybe pick out one of these keys to start with and why you think that's important, and maybe an example or two of how we're going to achieve that.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having us on. I would highlight the strategic priority number 1, which will focus us on increasing academic rigor and student engagement in our public schools. And all of the strategic priorities, of course, are important, but the strategic priority 1 is very critical, Don, because it gets right to the heart of what is to happen in our schools. It requires an intensive focus on teaching and learning, a focus on improving the instructional practices of our teachers, the quality of the learning experiences of our children. And so as a result, as we continue to develop our teachers and enhance the competencies that they have and improve the quality of what takes place in the classroom, we expect to see an increase in the outcomes for our children.
So when you say outcomes, you're talking about the test results will be better.
That's correct, yes. And we look at the test results for the international assessments as well as for what we call our national assessments as well.
So how would you say where we are right now is where students are?
So I would describe it as we are in a position where we need to improve, of course, and schools constantly want to improve and systems constantly need to improve, but when we consider the results of our students, we know and we recognize that we have to improve those results.
Right. One of the things I noticed from some of the results, Cambridge results and others for the primary schools and middle schools, is the science and math tend to be a little bit lower. And in the report it talks about STEAM, to try to increase that. Why is STEAM so important? Some people may think it's like the steak and the sizzle, and some people may think it's a little bit of sizzle there, but what's the real stake here with STEAM?
Well, STEAM focuses on what we call 21st century teaching experiences. So there's the integration of the science, the technology, you have the arts involved in there, engineering, and for some countries they also have agriculture as well as the arts and the mathematics. So it focuses on an integrated approach, a higher level of instruction, higher level and more quality experiences for our children.
Right. Now I noticed from the report it focused a little bit on the middle schools and Connect Tech. So tell us a little bit about what's happening with the middle schools and how they're getting coding and working with individuals to try to teach them this coding language to be successful in the 21st century.
Okay, and just for clarification, so the coding is actually taking place at the primary schools at this point with the upper primary children, and we're really excited to be partnering with Connect Tech. And so they're going into our schools, and so our P5 or our P6 students have an opportunity to acquire coding skills early. Our goal would be to expand the program so that as they move to the middle or to the next level, I should say, that they will have opportunities to continue with coding. And coding is considered a 21st century language.
Now, Kelly, one of the priorities that you're dealing with staff development and things, so maybe one of the priorities that you feel is really important as we're trying to hit here?
Yes, so one of those priorities would be ensuring that across primary and middle schools, that our teachers and our educators are trained on standards-based grading education. So it really is a grading reform. We really have to shift some of the ideas that we have around teaching and learning. So it is new for everyone. There are elements of it that teachers may be already implementing, but the focus for my team is to ensure that everyone understands and common language around standards-based grading. So it really is about prioritizing the standards that we have in our curriculum, making sure that they are separated into learning progressions. It gives lots of clarity, not only to teachers to guide them with their instruction, but students and eventually parents in terms of what students should know and what they're able to do. So it's really a different type of system. It's a different approach from the conventional way that we have graded before. But with it, it's not just about grading. That's a piece of it, but the larger piece is about really enhancing what we do in the classroom around the standards that we are expected to teach.
So what was happening before?
So we're still in a traditional or a conventional grading system, and right now, if I could be very candid, it's not necessarily fair in that it depends really on your philosophy and maybe how you were brought up in a system. You know, some people grade homework, some people put in effort into the grade. So standards-based grading is solely and wholly about making sure that the grade that's reflected is from academic achievement only. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't want to honor citizenship and work ethic and behavior. What we're saying in standards-based grading is that they should be communicated separately. So there's not a doubt in your mind that when you see a grade going forward, when we really transition into standards-based grading, what that information is telling you about where students are in relation to this standard. So it's going to give real accuracy and clarity, because you're not going to have all those other things that would dilute the grade, like a homework grade, like a grade for effort, or maybe I penalized you today because you had late work. So all those things will be eliminated in a grading-based system education.
Now, will that also help make sure, like, if a student who's going to East End Primary is being graded the same way somebody who's going to Heron Bay?
Absolutely. So one of the tools that we have teams working on now, definitely in the core content areas, is a tool called the proficiency scale. So everything we do around this proficiency scale, instruction, planning, assessment, and feedback will look the same for P1 to P6 to M1 to M3. So we'll all be using the same standardized document to do teaching and learning. Now, I'm not saying that's an end-all be-all. There has to be training around that, right? Because still you can have misinterpretations around the tool, but that's really a huge part of the plan, the training around how to use what we call it's a proficiency scale.
Right. So there's a rubric the teachers will be using to make sure everything's
Absolutely. It's not necessarily a rubric. A rubric sometimes doesn't necessarily give things in from simple concepts to more complex concepts. A proficiency scale ensures that happens. So when you have a curriculum document and they list all these curriculum items, what the proficiency scale does is order them from simpler concepts to more complex. There's even a space on the proficiency scale that allows students that may go beyond that year level, that they have a place to go as well. So it's really honors what we call in schools differentiation. It honors that we're all different learners. We're not necessarily all at the same place in our learning. And so that's one great thing about standards-based grading. It really is going to force us into a space that we need to meet the needs and be very responsive on the fly sometimes to the needs of our learners.
Yeah. No, I understand, like, whenever you go through a big change, there's a little bit of pushback, a little bit of uncomfortability, because you're not doing things the same way that you've been doing it for 10, 20 years. How could this have possibly been rolled out a bit better to teachers and principals so that, you know, maybe they were in a safe spot for themselves to help implement this?
Okay. Can I answer?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a bit rough in September and down to December. But what the team did, and they're called the Standards-Based Steering Committee. We've done a lot of research, so not just research on standards-based grading, but also about change. And a change as big as standards-based grading, it's really a transformative grading report system. It just means that it will take a lot of work. So on January the 2nd, we really talked about that. We really massaged that in that professional development to say, we hear you, we know that it's a lot, it's a struggle, we do understand we don't have some of the pieces and some of the training, and so we're really plugging and moving forward. The response so far has been really great. We've been really focusing a lot on what we call standards-based instruction, so that teaching and learning piece, and so it has really been pleasant, and I would think leaders will echo this because they've been on some of the walkthroughs in the schools, the shifts that we have seen in the teaching and the learning. So the grade reporting system is extremely important. It's the communication piece from teachers to parents and students, but it doesn't take place over the teaching and the learning part. So that we're really happy with. Just talking to teachers, so we're a lot on the front line in schools lots of the times doing walkthroughs in PD. It's really, there are lots of success stories. Everyone has their narrative and their story. And so we're just moving ahead. And the thing is, you have to keep on talking about it's change, it's different. It really speaks to your philosophy about grading. And we will grapple with it, but we will move and get through. We will.
I wanted to add, one of the important things is that ongoing professional development, the frequency of the professional development, and I think it would be important for you to share about the frequency and intensity of the PD, because that is paramount to helping teachers to shift their practice.
Absolutely. So the Standards-Based Steering Committee are using this type of model. We collected some baseline data by going into schools, and then what we did was we looked at the data and we said, you know what? There needs to be professional development around this particular area. And so then we would go in and give professional development, and then we follow that up with support and a walkthrough to see, well, what we learned, is it actually being applied? And you go in and you can see, well, you know what, we probably still need to unpack, or we need to work on these things. Sorry. And so what we have done since January the 2nd, we've mapped out a 6 month, so from January to June, in terms of what professional development would look like. So in absence in some of the tools, and what I mean by that is proficiency skills, naturally it made sense to focus on standards-based instruction. So every month we go into schools and we do professional development, and then we also do a walkthrough sort of protocol so that we can kind of support what we did is what you learned. Additionally, when you're moving and transitioning into a standards-based grading system, education system, what you need to also do is build capacity. So your leaders who are on the front line, also per primary school and middle school, we have what we call 2 SPG champions. So they come monthly the champions come for a whole day professional development around standards-based grading tenets. Principals, we have about 3 hours with them once a month as well. So we're really trying to build capacity in our leaders. And at least you should have 2 champions at your school, so that when we really start to move and transition, you have persons that can also support. So the idea is that right now they're in a learning phase because they're really learning about standards-based grading. But in the new academic year, we want to kind of give some of the heavy lifting over to the champions, so they will be doing some of the on-site professional development. We have another group, we call them the standards-based grading power school technicians, or we call them the Geek Squad. And really right now what they're doing is meeting with one of our officers that deals with the power school, Shina Simons, and they are really working towards making sure that the grade reporting system is compatible and aligned with the practice and philosophy of standards-based grading. So they get to meet at least once a month. We're trying to up the ante in the next month in terms of, just really them sewing in, making some recommendations to the Department of Education. And there are other stakeholder groups that will be important. So if you're a user of the grade report system, you really need to sew into kind of what the format, the aesthetics look like. And so this group is made up also of teachers as well. And so they meet. So it's really, your first year, you really want to build capacity, because you want to go in the next year, it's 600 plus stakeholders in just the primary and middle school alone. So you need that support from other leaders in the system to really, for transition and implementation, to be very successful. So it's really been a building phase with the leaders, but we're not leaving out the teachers. We're still making sure they are receiving the resources and the professional development as well. So next week we're actually getting ready to run a series of webinars These webinars will focus a lot on some of the new tenets of standards-based grading, so this proficiency scale. Not everyone has them, but it doesn't mean that they cannot be front-loaded with information about what it looks like, how it was developed, how do we use it going forward. So it's really just an appetizer for more to come in the new academic year. So that we'll launch that starting next week. We think it's going to be a 6-webinar series, but the first 3 we will launch starting next week. And I think the final kind of professional development will be with our parents. We keep it's Parents Matters.
Next week.
One next week on the 25th. We had one also in February?
Yes.
In February as well. So we're trying to do 3 before we leave, before we leave out of the academic year. And it's really just, once again, to just start communicating to parents the language about standards-based grading and where we're transitioning, still honoring that we don't have all the pieces together. Some of the things that we're still doing will be traditional-like until we really get all the tools and we really get all the training, so that we can get to the point where we say, you know what, we're really ready to be a full SBG education system. So they are getting some professional learning because it's an interactive hour-and-a-half that we spend with parents teaching them about SBG. So, we're trying to touch all stakeholders. The basic thing the Mazzano representative said, she said, communicate. And so, that we're really trying to honor that.
Yes. Right. I wanted to add, if you don't mind, that I wanted to also share that our curriculum officers are also involved in the professional development.
Yes, thank you.
And it's critical for them to develop their capacity as well, because they are responsible for going out into schools, to conducting the walkthroughs, and to ensure, along with the principals who are the instructional leaders, that quality instruction is taking place. So we're developing the capacity of officers as well, and they're in those sessions
They are.
with the principals.
They are actually with the principals. So we actually met with them yesterday, and they're very excited. They're like, we're coming on the next walkthrough. So it's really everyone. We just want to speak with one voice, and if we can do that, I really think it's been a great thing in terms of shifting teachers from a space that they were in between September and December to a better place. And the teaching is never going to be easy. So every time I get into a workshop, I always say, if you signed up to be a teacher, it was never going to be an easy journey and route, but it is very worth it if you love students.
Right. Now, 2 things with communication, and I'll let you know ahead of time, and then I'll get back to you in a second. But like the communication consultant that government's put out, our RFQ.
Department of Education.
Yes,
put out
Department,
RFP.
yes, RFQ.
Okay, so but I want to address first is Power School. So communicating to the parents. I'm familiar with Edsby and with Maplewood, and the grades go up. The parents know right away. How do you think this is going to be an important tool to help the parents be more involved in their students' lives?
So I'll talk a little bit about availability to parents, and then Ms. Douglas can talk maybe about what parents can expect to see going forward. But Power School is available 24/7. That's the exciting part about it. And if I'm a parent, I can access it via my laptop, via my phone. I can go into Power School. I will be able to go in, look at a particular standard, and see the assessments that have been administered to my child. So the information is available to parents 24/7. Moving forward, what can we expect to see in the grade book?
Right. So basically, I don't have as much information as I would like, because we literally, the Power School technicians, along with Mr. Simons, have just really started to dig deep in terms of making sure that the grade reporting system will show the information that we want to show. So you can show lots of different information. The one thing is that we do want to show the standards, but when you think about parents, sometimes those standards are really unfriendly. And so part of the scale is that we actually have topics. So, just those talks. Should we do topics? Should we do this standard? Do we want to see all the standards, or do we want to see something like strands? So in science, we have biology, chemistry, physics, and inquiry. Well, is that enough information? So all those conversation pieces are important. And that's why part of the work that has to be done, you have to get stakeholder buy-in, but also you have to also sit down and have a conversation, because one thing I say, if it's a tool and the parents won't use it or teachers don't have access to it because it's not friendly to use, then we want to kind of tweak and rearrange some stuff. So really, I think that I would say in terms of going forward, we're really in the formative stages of making recommendations to the department. The team is actually doing some research. So I know in the last meeting, which was just on Tuesday, actually, yesterday, Shauna had a few. It's like there are multiple ways that we can report out in terms of what it looks like to parents. And so that you really need to kind of deep and decide what's going to be best for us. So, other than having standards on there, we talked about work ethic and behavior and citizenship also being a very important part of, the whole student. And so, you may want to have those things on there as well. So, you don't want to make it too lengthy and too long and just so, confusing, but you do want to give enough information because we're shifting really to a system. Standards-based grading is about communicating what students are learning. So it's not just about having Kelly Douglas physics, biology, math 70 B, or we're actually moving away from a system that, well, I don't know what that 70 really encompasses. Did you, what did you do today, or what have you been doing for the last term? The grade reporting system is really moving and shifting it to a space where there's more clarity and accuracy around what students are really doing, how they're behaving. What's the work ethic like, right? Despite a good score, if your work ethic is low, then you're not stepping up to the plate. So all those things are important to know about our learners.
Yeah, because sometimes the more gifted students, they don't have to try very hard to get that high mark, and they're just going out there.
Right. So remember, learning is beyond primary school and middle school and senior school. We are building lifelong learners. So work ethic is important when you go out to get a job. So you want to, all those things are important on that report card, and right from primary school.
Yeah, I think especially for the higher end ones where it's just easy. At some point, it won't be easy, whether it's in high school or college. They'll hit that road where, I have to study. And if they haven't studied,
absolutely.
But they don't have those techniques. Yeah. I just wanted to chime in on Power School as a student, because everyone knows I have a student at Elliott, so I log on to Power School on a regular basis. I have it actually set up where it sends me reports once a week, because you can set up so it can automatically send me these things. So I find it to be quite useful and seeing what she's achieving in school, and I look forward to some of the more user-friendly, because it can be a bit intimidating when you get on, and if you're not really a computer literate type person, it can seem overwhelming to some. But once you get used to it and know where to go and look for the stuff, you can find the things that you're looking for.
Now, I don't know if it's still true, but I remember when I was studying education and things, they said the number one indicator of student success was parent involvement. And how do you hope this is going to, make parents or help parents have the tools to really care and invest in their kids all the time?
The research does support that, Don, that parent involvement is one of the indicators or is a contributing factor to higher levels of achievement in students. One of the strategies we're using now, which is the Parent Matters meetings, parent education, I think more engagement with our parents, and also just providing them with the opportunity to learn more about Power School, more about schools, what we want to do as a system. I'm hoping that will increase the involvement of our parents. We want them involved. We want to hear their voices. We want their input.
So, Minister, getting back to the communications consultant, I know there's a bit of a pushback of people saying, why spending the money on this person just to talk about education? Why don't we put the money into helping improve education? So, your chance to respond.
Well, Don, it's extremely important that the Department of Education is able to get their message out there effectively to the stakeholders, which are the parents and then by extension the rest of Bermuda, of exactly what's going on and why it's being done to get to and to where we want to get with what's going on in education. So I see it as money well spent to bring in someone to assist us with that. As you can tell from what as Kelly has talked, she is extremely busy.
And extremely excited and enthused about it.
And you can tell from the commissioner is I don't understand when did she actually sleep and move, because she's responding to emails, in late nights and early mornings. But there is something within education. Education is one of those things. You walk down the street, everyone says, "Oh, education is a hard ministry. Education is the toughest thing going." But I look at it from a different perspective. Education, we have an opportunity to make a real impact on the lives of not only the Bermudians that exist today, but the Bermudians that haven't been born yet by what it is that we do. We have identified, and through Plan 2022, that the educational component of getting what is being done out there is just not been there over the years. And so Plan 2022 points to the fact that we need someone that can assist us to do that. It needs to be reiterated time and time again to anyone who's listening that Plan 2022 was a plan that was put together through public feedback, through extensive public consultation. This is what the public has said. This is what we want our education system to look like. And we're just following that roadmap that the Bermuda public has given us. And part of that roadmap in this instance says that having a media consultant or someone who's there to show us how to get what we're trying to do out to the public in the most effective way we can is something that is needed. And so we're just following that.
Right. But is that like a full-time job for somebody to do? Why can't somebody from the Department of Communications and Information take care of that role?
So I can respond to that. I want to begin by saying I believe that education touches everyone, every family. The roots reach out and it forms the foundation of this island. And yes, it's a full-time post. And the RFQ steps out a sort of a lengthy list of what we are looking to have the individual do. So it's communication, it's PR, it's updating information on our webpage, it's newsletters, so and the list will go even beyond that. I believe that we have a responsibility to keep our island updated. So timely updates are critical, and when persons are involved with their major responsibilities, it doesn't always allow for timely and ongoing updates to the community. I think that we have a responsibility to keep the country updated on what is happening with education. As I said, it touches everyone, every family. So we're excited that we'll have someone who will come on board to assist with communication and across the board in a variety of areas.
And I also just want to add to that, Don, we're not doing anything that's foreign to the Department of Education, because in years past, I've since found out that the Department of Education has had a dedicated officer that does this role. And you spoke about DCI, or Department of Communications. The press officers at DCI are involved with multiple ministers across the board. So we looked at this and we saw that there was a space for someone to do this exclusively for us, rather than remove a Department of Communications officer, which would then leave other ministries wanting. So it's a catch-22 when it comes to why couldn't we use DCI for this. And also remember, I think it's important that people know that DCI they are press officers. They are not campaign. They're not creating educational campaigns. They're not creating public campaigns. They are press release officers. They are press officers, and that's what they're there to handle. Queries that come into the government, not just from education, but from all ministries, and require them to do responses and the like based on that. This person will be doing something totally different from that, and that is creating a campaign for the Department of Education, so we can ensure that our people in the island know exactly what's going on at all times within education.
No, I think it was called like a spin doctor. Do you think that's a fair way to describe that role?
I find that description very offensive, because we are reporting the absolute truths, the good and the bad of what's going on within education. We realize that we have things that need to improve, and I think you just heard Callie talk about we're not there when she talks about standard-based education system. There are pieces that still need to be put in place. We're not afraid to say that, right? And so when we talk about a spin doctor, I conjure someone who's going to say stuff to try and make things that that aren't going so well look better than they are. That's not where we want to be. We've had too much of that with education. Education is far too important for us to play around with it like that. We have to let the people know what the truth is of where we are now, what we need to do to get to where we want to be.
I liked your quote at the start of the report from Nelson Mandela. I'll just indulge the audience here a little bit. For those who haven't read it, it said, educating all of our children must be one of the most urgent priorities. We all know that education, more than anything else, improves our chances of building better lives.
Yes.
And I know, like the government has talked about 2 Bermudas, and you know, if all the kids get educated and have a good education, how is this going to help break down that barrier? I mean, it's not going to be an overnight thing, but over time, how is that going to happen?
Well, over time, once we get to a point where people begin to love education and they always want to seek education, that will always give them opportunities to improve their lot in life. And education is one of those things that I want to say just transcends ethnic backgrounds, transcends the ability to learn and all of that, because education comes in different forms. But as long as you are continuing to move forward with yourself and improving yourself, it creates it creates self-esteem that you can use to catapult yourself into better situations. And you know, just quickly touching on that, I know it's something we're going to talk about later. One of the things, one of the questions we had about the teen Tatum that were being requested was, why couldn't the students go to Bermuda College? I'm happy to report they can go to Bermuda College because of efforts that we've put to allow people to enter into the Bermuda College to improve themselves, have put Bermuda College in a space where they don't have the space because they have more students than they had the last time we had issues like this. So these are the types of things that are happening, and people are taking advantage of them, and I'm happy to report that they are taking advantage of them. And one thing that I do know is that an educated community is a better community, where we will have the ability to see things a lot differently than perhaps how we used to see them.
Right. Which also touches on one of the key priorities, ensuring career, college, and workforce readiness. Two angles there. One, the fact that the government has put into place those students with 3.0 GPAs can go to Bermuda College for free. But on top of that, what the government initially did was the
$300,000 grant.
$300,000.
Which I can say has helped. Where it's just over 550 students have taken advantage of that and have achieved some level of positioning themselves at the Bermuda College to just go further with their education. And that's an incredible number in less than 2 years. 554 people, I think, was the number of persons that have taken advantage of that and been able to go to the Bermuda College, who may have not even been able to even fathom thinking how we were going to do that, or if they could even do it.
Right. The part of the thing, I guess, too, is like as our students graduate high school, how do we get them? Obviously we have Bermuda College, and we want them to take advantage of that because that's a nice, less expensive option for the parents. When I was out in California, I went to a community college for my first 2 years because it was less expensive to do it. But how do we get them to also seek to go to better schools, overseas, four-year institutions and things? I know when you were principal over at Cedar Bridge, you used to outside the Ruth C. James Auditorium in May or whatever, you'd start having where the students were going to
the
college.
Board would put their name, they put pictures and the acceptance letters. Yes.
At least the few times that I was up there for a couple years, most of them were going to Bermuda College. How do we get them to seek education elsewhere, whether it be the Caribbean, the United States, Canada, or the UK? You know, how do we push that forward?
Well, I think first of all, the majority will go to Bermuda College. It is seen as a good option, a viable option for them. And I commend Bermuda College because when I think about the number of agreements that they have with the universities, our students are able to go to Bermuda College, obtain an associate's, and then go to what I would call partner universities or colleges, and so transfer their credits, and then 2 years after 2 years overseas will have earned their first degree. So I think, if persons look at that carefully, I think it's an excellent pathway to take. And for those who want to consider keeping their children with them for 2 years after high school, for those who are saying, you know, financially this may be the best option, but our children are not disadvantaged by going to the Bermuda College. In fact, they have an advantage because when I finish there, I've got my associates and 2 years overseas, I've got my degree. And I also, it just reminds me about the dual enrollment program. So you have children who are in high school and who are taking their college courses and who can, by the time they graduate from Cedar Bridge or the Berkeley Institute, have an associate's degree. And so for those students, 2 years after that, 2 years overseas, they will have their first degree.
I didn't know this until about a month ago. I did a story because Delwood's raising money for a van because some of their students go up to Cedar Bridge.
That's right.
Yes.
So it's sort of like
right. So both senior
pushing-
schools, right. So that started several years ago where we had the idea, okay, well, our children are going to Bermuda College for dual enrollment. Well, let's start opening the doors so our middle school students can come in and start taking their GCSE, start taking S1 and S2 courses early, and those students can actually graduate early. In fact, there's an article in the RG, it might have been yesterday, about a Cedar Bridge student who's graduating 2 years early. He's, I think he's...
Case.
Yes, Case Wales.
Yeah,
right.
Case Wales.
And I think he earned a United World College scholarship.
Scholarship, yes.
So there are tremendous, you know, I think what we have to, sometimes Bermudians want to sell things short that happen in Bermuda. Bermuda College has set so many persons up for success. I'm one of them. So I can speak to that.
Just talking a little bit about the Bermuda College and the students that are going there. How many students do we have roughly doing the dual enrollment?
I don't have those numbers offhand. I apologize for that, but we could certainly get them back to you.
Yes.
Yes.
And also, Dawn, I think it's important for us to talk about there are 2 dual enrollment programs
Yes.
that go on at the
Yes.
Bermuda College. We have the academic route, which everyone is familiar with, but we have what we call the applied
Right.
technology route as well. This is one that's specifically geared towards students who may want to go into vocational careers afterwards. One thing that I like about this program, and I must profess, I was a lecturer for the program the first year it started. I lectured in Introduction to AutoCAD to the students. So it was really powerful for me to go back on Wednesday because I have these walk-in Wednesdays where persons can come and watch, and the students get presentations on what they've been working on. There were 3 young men that gave presentations. These 3 men are the first graduates of the first cohort. And it was so interesting listening to them because I remember them being in the class and playing around, and they were Cedar Bridge and some were Berkeley students. They're playing around and they didn't really, but now here they are, they're graduating. One of them is about to graduate from the Bermuda College with his associate's degree proper, and the other 2 have utilized that course to get admitted into the power engineering program that's conducted by Workforce Development. So to watch these young men talk about how they matured going to the program, when they first came it was about playing around, but then to see them now talking to peers who may have been in S1 when they were in S4, you know, saying don't play around, this is what I learned in this program, this is how far it's gotten me, now I'm working on my power engineering certification. The other one's working on his computer engineering, computer programming certifications, and he's already been accepted into university overseas. That's a powerful statement where we have young men, and in this case, the first cohort only had men, but now it's co-ed. But we have young men talking about how I learned in this and how this program has now catapulted me forward. This is the types of stories that our people need to see of our young people because they're doing wonderful things within our school system. The dual enrollment program of the applied technology was so powerful for me that as a minister I created 5 scholarships specifically for that program. Any student that goes into that dual enrollment, the way it's set up, they do the 2 years of dual enrollment, but they would need 1 additional year of Bermuda College to get their associate's degree. We have now created scholarships for 5 students per year that if they want to go on and continue and get their associates, the Ministry of Education will pay for that.
Now, you mentioned the young men. The report from the previous year talked about public school graduates and only 36% were young men, young boys. How do we increase that number? Because, I mean, a lot of times we talk about how the young men in our community are disenfranchised. And obviously this program's a bit of a help, but how do we get that number so that the men are graduating in equal numbers with the women?
Well, I think we need to make education fun. We need to make education our priority. It has to become a national priority for all of us, and that is parents, those who don't have children in school, teachers, the people at the ministry, the people in the department. We all have to be going in the same direction and letting our children know that this is opportunities for you to enhance yourself in the future. And once we get to that point, and I think we're slowly getting there, but once we get to that point to show that we're not going to give up on you, especially our students need to know we're not giving up on you. We're going to put everything that needs to be put in place to ensure your success. I think we'll gradually see more students grab towards that. The College Promise Program is just one of those examples where we're saying, as you mentioned earlier, if you have the appropriate GPA, you'll get to go to Bermuda College for free. Right? So that is now setting them up for success. They now see that there is something that I can get if I just do what it is I need to do. When you're a student in school, the only thing you need to do is actually go to school, really. And so we're putting things in place to encourage not only the students to understand that if I do what I need to do, there are things for me, but the parents to understand that as well, and allow the parents to encourage the students.
Right. You mentioned TM Tatum, and that's sort of dominated the education news cycle for the last bit. You know, Tatum's had a long history of having mold problems. Even like 2016, there was a report done and it listed 5 specific places where the mold was, and even the 2017 report when you went out and they had inspections at all the schools except for Delwood. It mentioned mold on the gym walls at Tatum. Why hasn't we know that there's a problem here? We've time and time again. Why hasn't it been taken care of?
Well, the issue with Tatum has come up, and I think part of the reason behind some of that is just the fortitude to move forward with what needs to be done. And what needs to be done at Tatum is there are some structural issues that have been identified that need to be corrected that for whatever reason wasn't corrected after it closed and reopened.
When you say structural issues, what are those?
The structural issues are water penetration through the building itself. And all of the reports that I have seen and the subsequent ones that we have received since the issues we've had point to water penetration as the source of the creation of mold. But it doesn't stop there. The report also talks about general untidiness within our schools, the hoarding of papers, the improper storage of materials. So there's a litany of things that need to be corrected, and mindset and mind shifts need to happen. And TM Tatum is going to be one of the shining examples of how we move forward with that. So yes, we can, if we fix one area, we have to fix all areas. So what has happened in the past is what I want to say is we've immediately run to the worst spot, done what needed to be done there, but instead of looking at what is the cause of this, of what's happening and solving that problem, we've fixed it, and then the problem has just recurred because we've not addressed the actual issues that cause it. When I read through the report, because we only received the up-to-date health and safety report yesterday morning, and it mentions everything that people always talk about. Air ventilation is inadequate. The windows need to be opened more, but if the windows are unoperable, you can't open the windows. Storage of papers in wrong locations, in locations they shouldn't be stored. Different things in classrooms that really should not be there that lead to the rise of some of these issues. So that's when we talk about having those types of conversations we have to have, and that goes all the way from the staff that's coming in to do the actual repairs, all the way down to the custodial staff and the teachers that are actually in the buildings. We're just got to have those honest and open conversations that if we don't want to have the repeat of these things, these are the things that need to be in place.
Yeah, but I mean, some of those things were listed in the 2016 IAQS report. So,
and that's a part of my frustration is when I did go back and look at the 2016 report, I was like, hey, the stuff we're talking about now is we were talking about it in 2016. We were talking about it in 2013. Why can't we have those conversations with the people that need to have those conversations? But I can assure you that that's what's going to happen now. We're not going to reopen that school if we cannot get it up to a standard where it is completely mold free and we've also talked to the staff, the custodians, and everyone else that needs to be talked to about how to operate within a school so it's more efficient, so we don't come up with those issues again.
Right. So as a parent, let's say I have an M1 or M2 student, what are the chances that Tatum will be open come September?
That is something that we're working on now. The idea is to do what we need to be done, but this just speaks to a larger problem that we have within our schools. We have to look at this from a fiscal point of view and from a resources point of view. If our resources and fiscal and monies can be put elsewhere to ensure that we have improved outcomes elsewhere, that's going to be the hard decisions that we're going to have to make. Is it more feasible for us to do what we need to do at T and Tatum and take money and resources away from somewhere else that could use them, or do we say we'll put that money and resources into somewhere else so we can improve the outcomes there, and deal with T and Tatum at a later date? Those are the types of decisions that as the Minister of Education I have the awesome responsibility to make, and those decisions I will make them and take the lumps and bumps that go with it. But at the end of the day, everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we intend has to do with educational outcomes and our students. And so there's going to be change is difficult. Change can be rough sometimes, but if we have to make the necessary changes to ensure the outcomes of Plan 2022 and where we want our children to be when we talk about a 21st century education system, those decisions will have to be made.
Which sort of leads into, we have declining enrollment. The postponement sort of postponed early registration for the schools. I know L. James, and I just want to offer condolences to the James family.
Yes.
This week
Condolences to
on
L.
the
James.
passing of Lloyd, St. George's legend. Sorry if you're from Somerset, but he recommended in 2010 when he was education minister that 5 schools be specifically closed just because we have declining enrollment. And from the 2018 report that you have here, talked about how enrollment figures have gone from 5,200 in the public schools to 4,900. So you're losing about 100 students a year. We know from the census report that the birth rate is declining. It's expected to hit about 400 in 2026 from about just under 500 this year. And since 1971, it was 1,000 births per year. So when is somebody going to have the fortitude to say, okay, we're better off, and maybe you just hinted to it, we're better off consolidating some schools, putting resources to making sure that X number of schools are at the top shape, and go forward from that?
Well, Don, I have a different take on that.
Okay.
That really goes differently from what people seem to think. We have an aging infrastructure. That's a known fact. Some of our schools, our youngest primary school is 56 years old. We hear that all the time. I have a different take on that, and the take that I have on that is we need to first determine what it is we want our schools to be able to perform, and then see if the existing school infrastructure can do that. So we are looking at, when we look at Plan 2022 and we look at beyond, because 2022 is just around the corner, we have to look beyond this. And we were looking at what is it that we want in a 21st century school system? How is that going to look? What are the necessary resources needed to enact that? And then we have to take that and say, can the building that we're now currently occupying actually supply us with that? And those are the conversations we need to have, not just let's close schools because enrollment is declining, right? That is putting the cart before the horse. The enrollment is declining, but is the building that the children in capable of doing the things that we needed to do? And when we're talking about a 21st century education system, and if it's not, then we start having conversations about how we can pull resources together and perhaps pool them in other locations to ensure that we can put forth that type of education system we want. So it's, and we've done the numbers. We already have projections from now on to 20. I said this is planned 2022, but we're talking about what our school system is going to look like in 2026, 2028. So we're already looking at that and what is best, what will be the best system and what will give us more quote unquote bang for our buck. And so those are the types of conversations that we're going to start having with the public in very short order, because I have given a mandate that before September 2019 schools open, the public will have a very good idea of what direction we intend to go in the ensuing years.
Yeah. But doesn't it also create opportunities? Let's say, for example, Tatum's not up to snuff in September, and we know like a 2021 education where people move into laptops and things, and which means there needs to be plugs in the floors for the students to have that. Doesn't it create an opportunity then that while Tatum's being closed, if it's closed, that you can then you sort of have a carte blanche to create ideally what you would like in a 21st century?
Well, the simple question to that is yes. The simple answer to that is yes. And what I've challenged our facilities management team as well as the works engineering is to come back with a detailed plan of what it's going to take to get T and Tatum up to snuff. And that's just not talking about what we see in the report, which talks about water intrusion, cleaning, opening windows and stuff. But I've challenged them to say, well, what I want to see what in terms of electrical, in terms of plumbing, in terms of lighting. I want to see all of that, because if we're talking about moving to a building that will give us a 21st century look, then we need to be talking about doing all of that within our building, not just getting up on the roof, patching it so water doesn't come in again. Because how does that, like you said, how does that enhance us being able to issue all our students with laptops and then walk around the school? Is it even feasible for the building to be able to do that, even if we do fix it? So that's the types of conversations we're having, and I don't want to preempt the things that we're going to be talking about in the near future that has come out of some of the discussions we have, but that is some part of it. Is the building fit for use? And if it's not fit for use, can we make it fit for use, or is there other options that we have to pursue?
Well, part of the thing is just like, I'm just spitballing here, but I see like an opportunity that, okay, the enrollment's down, you can temporarily maybe close some schools and move students to other institutions close by, refit the school, set it out so that it can be ideally what you want.
Well, you say refit, we say rebuild.
Rebuild, okay.
Right?
Yeah,
So we could even be talking about rebuilding schools, but that's exactly it. We need to look at our infrastructure and see if it can be renovated to suit what we needed to do, and if it can, then we can have a discussion about rebuilding. But we're not just going to be closing schools or merging schools and that just because enrollment is low at the school. We have to look at the buildings and make sure they're fit for purpose.
Well, doesn't that also make it a little bit more sellable to nobody wants their school to close, whether you're, because before I talked about East End and St. David's and Heron Bay and Dalton B. Tucker as some of them, but if you're saying, okay, we're temporarily refitting the school or rebuilding the school, making it better, easier sell to parents?
Well, I've always said that if you're taking something away, and you're saying that you want to replace it, it has to be replaced with something that's better than what you're taking away. And so that's where we are. So there will be no consolidation that goes on under my leadership, unless it's something that's going to benefit the system benefit the system in its entirety, and that's where we have to be with it.
Hour's gone by really quickly. So there's a lot more that we could deal with. But just one more thing. I know like Delwood's dealt with, I guess, like two things at least with Tatum. I'm still not completely sure where all the students end up from Tatum. So if
the students will be split between Whitney, Delwood, and Sands Secondary. There are lots of factors that have gone in, and first of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank the team that worked on that. They worked diligently. We only had literally 4 days to pull this together, and the students have been assigned based on different criteria. Some of it has been where they live. So if you were in the Somerset area, Southampton area, we wanted you to go to Sands. Some of it's based on the actual programs the students were in. And so we've looked at all of those factors and assigned them to the proper schools. I know we were just talking about the dual enrollment with the high schools. The students, for example, the students who do dual enrollment with Berkeley and Cedar Bridge will be stationed at Whitney because it didn't make sense for them to be at Sands because they got to do dual enrollment in Hamilton. So it's easier for us to figure out how we can transport them from one school to the school versus trying to figure out how they can get from Sands to town and then back. And so those are the types of things. There are some students where programs that they were in are only available at certain schools. And so we have to figure out where they go. There are other things with siblings being at the school. We don't want to split them up. So there's huge factors. And as I said, the team that actually did this did such a great job, a yeoman's job of actually pulling this off and pulling it together. And I think that does show the type of leadership that we have within the department and the resources that we have, that a team was able to sit down and figure out where 182 students will be that best suits their abilities and best suits what it is that they're doing already within school. Keeping them together as much as possible with the peers that they know that they normally associate with was also one of the factors. So talking to them, they brought in the teachers, they brought in the principal to discuss every single student and the student profile and come up with the best possible solution for them with the situation that we have. So again, I said this is something we were only told on Thursday, that when we sat down with the PTSA president and the health and safety coordinator of the school and the deputy principal, and we told them it was a very frank conversation that if the teachers are unwilling to go into the school by Monday, this Monday past, we will have to transfer the students elsewhere because our responsibility is for our entire system. Although T and Tatum was very high on the list, the entire system, because the schools that these students were in were primary schools, and those schools were getting ready to sit their checkpoint exams. So they couldn't be there. So we had to transfer them away. And that's when we made it clear. If you don't go in on Monday, we have to go into this option, which is an option none of us really wanted. We wanted to be able to work with T and Tatum staff and work with the school and have them in there, and then to the end of the term, and then perhaps come in the summer and see what we can do to get it ready for the upcoming year. So we are where we are. We continuously work with the representatives of the parents. That's the PTSA president. So he's always been aware of everything that we're doing from step to step, and we expect the PTSA to get that message out, or assist us to get that message out to the parents, the health and safety coordinator for the school, and the deputy principal, and now that the principal's back will be the principal, their responsibility for getting the information we discussed out to the teachers. And so as long as everyone is doing their job and getting the information out there, I think the transition will be as smooth as we can possibly make it. I have no doubts that there are going to be some people who are disappointed in where their children will be transferred to, and that's life. But we have instances where they can come and talk to the department and give their what is bothering them about the placement, and we can see if we can work with them. But if, as I said, some of the criteria really dictated where the students will go. Space requirements dictated where the students will go. So there isn't a lot of wiggle room, but there is some wiggle room. So if someone comes and says, hey, you assign them to Whitney, but I stay in Somerset, I want them to go to Sands, there could be some leeway to make that transition. But
so it was a lot more nuanced than the M1 students are going here, M2.
No, it's a lot more went into it than just that.
Right. I guess the other thing is, I've heard reports that Delwood has a mold issue as well, and some of the students have been transferred there.
As a what issue?
A mold issue.
Well, remember when we just after the election, one of the major things we did was the abatement of Delwood, because Delwood was actually closed at that time as well. They closed down in May 2017, May or June? No, they closed early. They closed early. School closed early, early June. They let the children go, and then in July we realized the school needed to be fixed, so all hands were on deck to get that fixed. I'm also pleased to say that the gymnasium was scheduled to open this week as well, and they haven't had a gymnasium for 2 years. And so I talked to the Minister of Works, who did say that the gymnasium looks like it's on schedule to open this week, which is a great milestone for them to not have it for 2+ years. there is always going to be infrastructure challenges with the age of the buildings that we're talking about, like I said earlier, but we are committed to making sure that our schools are safe and clean for our students to go in. That's our high priority, right up there with ensuring that instructional education is done, that the educational instruction is done within our schools. We're going to continue to work with them, and as you said, there are some opportunities for us to look at how we can refurbish schools, how we can rebuild schools. There are some opportunities that are going to be present itself, and we're going to do the things that is necessary to ensure that our school system becomes a school system that other countries look and say, hey, a small island can do this. Perhaps it's something we can do in our islands to the south or other small communities within the world.
I just want to give everyone one last chance to say something if they want to. Kelly, anything that you think that it's Education Month, anything you think that you want to talk about or mention right here at the end?
I guess I just want to say in terms of the extended space grading that it is a very transformative thing that we're about to embark upon, and it will not be easy. It's going to be a big shift in terms of how we transition and how we take it on, but if we all collaborate, if we're all in this together, and I mean every stakeholder from high levels of management right down to our teachers, our parents, and our students, that we're going to be all right, and we will reap the fruits of what the standard space grading education system can do in terms of us being number one. So I'm going to echo what the minister said, number one for education.
Okay. Commissioner?
I would just like to say that education has to be a priority for every citizen on this island, that we have to commit to ensuring that the Bermuda public school system is the best system. It requires everyone focusing on one vision, working together, being prepared to not only identify but what isn't working and working to improve that, but also there has to be a shift in the eyes of our community to identify what is working and to build on those strengths. But it is in the best interest of our island and the children of Bermuda for everyone to make education a priority.
Minister?
Thank you, Dawn. First of all, I want to thank the Commissioner, and I want to thank Callie, and of course Bernice for allowing allowing us to be here today. I think quite a bit of information has been shared. I also want to let the public know that we're open for business. You can contact the department if you have a question. I often encourage people, instead of just posting on social media, contact the appropriate persons, and if it cannot be figured out, then we can go from there. And I just want to piggyback on something that the Commissioner said. Often we hear from people, and I get videos all the time. It's like, look what they're doing in Finland. That's what they keep saying, right? Look what they're doing in Finland. And I'll never forget a conversation I had with the Minister of Education from Finland when I went to a seminar in London, the World Education Forum. And he said the biggest thing that Finland has done is convinced everyone that education is a priority. And everybody, whether it's from the person at the lower end of the income spectrum to the person at the higher end of the income spectrum, all believe in what it is that that their Department of Education is trying to do to bring education up. We need to make education a priority in our minds, not just in our thoughts and in the things that we say, but in our minds. We need a mind shift of the public perception of education and understand that it is important. As I stressed the parents on Monday, parents, your children look to you for guidance. They look for you. So if you are stressing out about education and not giving them some guidance on how to navigate through some of the things that are happening in education, they're going to come to school and they're going to feel defeated before they get there. Give them encouragement. Give your students encouragement. Let them know that you understand what they're up against. They're doing their best, and encourage them to just be joyful and happy and love to learn. A saying that I have is, you go to school to learn, but you learn how to love to learn at home. That's where it happens. Your parents, whoever's monitoring your children, teach them that learning is about loving how to learn versus school just being something somewhere you go because it's something you have to do.
And hopefully the audience today love to learn some few things today. And I really appreciate my guest, Callie Douglas, who's the Acting Staff Development Officer,
Thank you, Dawn.
Commissioner Kalmar Richards,
Thank you.
and the Minister of Education, Diana
Thank you.
Lorraine. I'm Don Burgess. I appreciate everyone tuning in today to Bermuda's News and Views here at the House, Bermuda. And as always, I hope you have a beautiful afternoon.